Hi, my name is Stephanie Price, and I'm a recovered alcoholic from Midwest USA. So I live in Michiana, which is on the Indiana-Michigan border. I've been recovered from alcoholism since 1996. It's now 2018, so it's about 22 years. Alcoholism for me was really just a symptom of the soul sickness, sin sickness, emptiness, not sure what all words to use, that pretty much every human suffers from. Mine was just expressed through the disease or the illness of alcoholism. And I'm grateful for that today, because if I had not had something that was literally killing me, I don't know that I would have ever gotten to the point where I was willing to cry out to the creator of all things and ask for him to help me. So thankful today for the pain that I experienced, because it brought me to my knees. So I want to share my story, and I just feel really confident that Abba Father is wanting me to share it, and I'm not entirely sure who's listening or what the goal is, but I'll just tell you this: if you are a alcoholic, or you think you might be, just listen closely and see if there's some things that you can relate to. I will tell you that the solution for alcoholism is not quitting drinking. So you, as a byproduct, end up being sober, as I have for 22 years, but that was not the goal of my recovery. My recovery goal was quite different, which I'll get to in a few minutes. I'm really convinced that's what's missing today from society, if you will, or really it's from kind of religious organizations that are attempting to help alcoholics. I think what's really missing are kind of two things. Number one, understanding that it's not a matter of choice. That drinking for the alcoholic is not a matter of choice. Drinking for some people, for most people, is a matter of choice, right? But for us, for whatever reason, we just got some different gene, or I'm not sure how all that works out, but for us, it's not a matter of choice. So that's the first misunderstanding. And then the second piece that I think is missing a lot of times, as I listen to radio preachers, as I listen to sort of church help programs, is a practical program of action. So for the alcoholic, the solution, of course, is the same as it's for everybody else. You humble yourself before God. You admit your powerlessness in life in general. You can't handle things. You can't manage things. I can do nothing good apart from God. I think several famous people have said that. There is no good in me apart from him. So we all have to get to that point. With the alcoholic, it's kind of easy. Easy is not the right word, but it's pretty simple to see that, right? Because there's evidence that suggests that we're just a big hot mess. The dilemma is what to do about that once you acknowledge it. So if you look at the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, steps 1 and 2 are that. I admit it, I am powerless over alcohol, or just powerless, period. You can take the alcohol part out, but the over alcohol is important for us alcoholics. But I'm powerless over alcohol, and my life had become unmanageable by me, right? So that's step 1. And that's really true for all humans. It's just we put the alcohol language in it for those of us who have that particular problem. The second step is that we come to believe that a power greater than ourselves, and that's power with a capital P. There really is only one who has all power, and I think anybody can recognize that. But there is one who has all power, and we have to come to believe that that power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. So can actually make us better, can bring us out of this soul sickness from which we suffer and into a life that is, at first we just hope we can just live and breathe and be reasonably happy, right? But in short order, we find ourselves rocketed into a fourth dimension. And that's just kind of I'll give you a little foreshadowing. If you want to recover, you're going to be amazed before you're halfway through. But the price is high. And that's where I think people run into trouble. They don't know what to tell the alcoholic to do. They know to tell him or her to believe certain things, right? Well, you have to believe this, and then you have to confess this, and then you should go to church and read your Bible and do these sort of things to kind of intellectually change so that you can receive the grace and the healing and the forgiveness that God has given you. And that's all great, and that's true from a scriptural standpoint. But what we lack so often, and actually what I have to offer, because it was offered to me, is a program of action, a way to actually do that. And that was via the 12 steps as they were written down for Alcoholics Anonymous in the 1930s. Those 12 steps actually make that a reality for the rest of us. So it wasn't enough for me to just believe something, because what does that even mean, right? That's like an intellectual assent to something that accomplishes very little. So I had to actually do something, right? And as I took actions in humility, out of desperation, believing that this power could restore me to sanity, then he himself was revealed to me in a way that I cannot deny. And so that wasn't because I mentally agreed to a creed or saw some things that other people were doing, join a discipleship group and sort of do these Bible studies and do service work or whatever. It was a real thing. It was an inside-out transformation, because the rest of the steps 3 through 12, are all about renewing the mind and having the mind renewed by Abba Father himself. But it gives you some practical work to do in the meantime. And I just feel like there's a lot of people out there that really want to help the alcoholic, but you're not quite sure how, and you're very well intended, and your words are correct, your theology, if you will, is correct. It's the practical program of action that you lack, and Abba Father has given it to some of us, and we are to share it with you. So I want to quick do that, and I want to do it via my story, which I'm trying to cut down and make it short and sweet and get to the good part. So I was born at a very young age. I was born in the 1971 in Midwest USA, and my parents were young parents. They were 18 and 20 when I was born. They came from different backgrounds. So my mom came from an alcoholic family, actually, where her dad, may he rest in peace, died of alcoholism. He was a lovable drunk, but he was definitely a drunk, and drank himself to death slowly and painfully, as we all kind of wondered why he would do such a thing. My dad came from a very religious family, so he was kind of a self-righteous background, where we don't smoke or chew or go with girls who do. And in fact, we are missionaries, and we go and tell the heathens, the native peoples, that they need Jesus. And so that's kind of the background he came from. So you put the two together, and they didn't get along all that well. I didn't have a heinous, horrible childhood. I just want to say that right off the bat. I was not abused or neglected in any of the major ways that a lot of people are, and I'm sorry for you if you are, but even if you have been, Abba Father can redeem that and make good out of it, which I know might be hard to believe, but it's true. So I didn't have a bunch of horrific things happen to me. I certainly had my share of disappointments and even harms committed, but nothing that tortures me at all. I do remember a moment, though. I was about 6 years old. My parents were having a fight of some kind, bickering back and forth about something or other. My dad was very given to kind of showing dominance. So, I'm in charge, I'm the man, that kind of thing. And he took my mom's purse, which was probably made out of macrame, because remember, this was 1977. So think Farrah Fawcett hair and bell bottoms and macrame everything, right? So he took my mom's purse, just in a show of dominance, and dumped it out onto the couch. And I remember all of these contents of her purse, just sort of bouncing everywhere, quarters and lipstick and checkbook. And I just thought, wow, that was really a jerky thing to do, for sure. What a jerk. My dad's such a jerk. And then I looked at my mom, and she just looked so pathetic, crying there, and so helpless, sort of, and yet angry underneath. I knew she was. And I watched this whole interaction, and at 6 years old, it began to register to me that the adults in my life really didn't know what was going on, or at the very least they lacked the skills to be able to function properly. And so because of that, they were not going to be able to take care of me. I mean, if they couldn't even manage their own lives, how in the world were they going to take care of me? I think it's an instinct in all of us to assume that the adults in our lives have it together. And I'm very clear with my children these days that, hey, look, I don't have it together. So we're all we're all children. God doesn't have any grandchildren, so we're gonna keep working through this life together. But anyhow, I remember at that moment making a decision. And the decision was this: I'm going to take care of myself, because these adults in my life cannot take care of me. They can't even function in their own lives. There's no way they're going to take care of me. So I'm going to take care of myself. And we could all argue, lots of people would argue and say that was actually a good reaction, right? It was it showed resilience and tenacity and maybe a sort of fight. And I would say, sure, it was probably instinct, and that's fine. I mean, that's just the way it is. I don't fault myself. But I am confident that I, at that moment, set myself in opposition to God. Because we as humans are not meant to take care of ourselves, right? We're meant to be dependent on a loving creator and then interdependent on one another. That's hilarious, guys. Sorry. Anyway, so I set out right then and there. See, girls just want to have fun, right? So I just wanted to take care of myself. I was going to handle my own life. And I set out to do so. I managed to do so for about the next about 18 years. And you would have thought in some ways that I was fairly successful. Now, it depends on what your standard is, right? So if your standard is, I went to school, I got a job, I was smart, I was going places in life, then yes, I was successful in some ways. But if your standard is, I have peace inside, I have purpose, I have an understanding of who I am and why I'm created and what I'm here for, I can get along with other people and have great, solid, beautiful relationships. I have meaningful interactions and purposes. If that's the standard, and I would argue that it actually is more the standard than any of the other things, I was actually a failure, just a huge failure. Now, of course, I didn't know this until I was into my 20s. So I went on throughout my childhood. My mom and dad divorced, probably not a big shocker, and my mom remarried a couple years later. I thought I would start to, maybe have the semblance of a real family now, and this would be awesome. My dad had left and joined the circus, which was a source of great embarrassment for me. And he also had he had gone from a religious fanatic to an alcoholic fanatic in short order. His story is his own to tell. It's pretty fascinating. But my dad is a great example of an alcoholic who was an alcoholic long before he ever had a drink, because the problem existed in him. The alcohol merely made it be expressed. And that's an important distinction, because not everybody who drinks a lot is an alcoholic, but there is something about us. There's two things actually, which I'll talk about in a minute, that make us a little bit different from everybody else. So my dad had kind of this crazy life going on, and moved away to Florida, was in the circus. So when my mom remarried, and I thought this will be great, like I'm gonna kind of be in a family now, and maybe we'll be a little bit more normal. Well, it was normal in my childhood hometown for everybody to drink, for the middle schoolers and the high schoolers to begin a drinking career, a partying career. So my hometown was kind of known for being a party area. And so when 8th grade hit and everybody was beginning to experiment, I shouldn't say everybody, but most people were beginning to experiment, that was just normal for me. That wasn't anything unusual. It wasn't peer pressure, and that if somehow peer pressure had been different, you never try to change your circumstances, guys. So the problem is never on the outside. So it wasn't my friends that were the problem. It wasn't my dad leaving us that was the problem. It wasn't any of that going on. It was me. It was me, the person. I so much wanted to fit in and just feel good and be okay inside, because I walked around basically unhappy, discontented, aimless, and wondering why I had these kind of holes inside me and I didn't know how to fill them. Well, alcohol filled them, and that is kind of how it works for a lot of people. It fills them for a short time, and then it kind of comes back and bites you in the rear end after a while. So anyhow, we began to experiment. So my friends and I would take alcohol into my room from my parents' bar and drink it. Go back to school on the next Monday and talk about it. And that was the extent of the beginning of my drinking. And I remember a night, I'll never forget this because this is absolutely pivotal, but I took a bottle of whiskey into my room. It was a Friday night. My mom and stepdad were out to dinner. I was by myself, and I thought, well, I'll take this whiskey into my room, drink a little bit of it, and go back to school and talk about it. And that would just be the extent of my drinking. That was my plan, and it's really important that you catch that. That was my intention, because my whole rest of my next 10 years was filled with one intention and another outcome. So, and that is very typical of the alcoholic. So if you're a heavy drinker and you're wondering if you're alcoholic, or if you know people who are heavy drinkers and you're wondering if they're alcoholic, take a look at what's their intention and then what's the outcome. So my intention was to have a few drinks off this bottle, go back to school and talk about it, and what actually happened is much different. So it was VO whiskey, if I remember correctly. I keep meaning to Google it, see if there really is such a thing, but I remember it being VO. I remember it tasting like Pine Sol, and I brought this bottle into my room, drank Kid Rock style, straight out the bottle, and began to have little sips. At first, nothing, no big deal, right? But after about the third big swig, which I could finally tolerate, I began to feel something I'd never felt before, and that was, I felt good. So I didn't even know how bad I felt until I didn't feel bad anymore, until I felt good. And I think that a lot of us humans, we walk around in constant pain. Many of us know it, many of us are aware, most of us try to hide it, most of us try to overlook it, we try to clean it up. But the reality is we walk around just very discontent and sad, really. And alcohol for me kind of took that away to the point that I went, oh wow, I feel great. So after a few drinks out of that VO whiskey bottle, I began to feel 10 feet tall and bulletproof, as they say. Suddenly my insecurities were gone. I felt like I probably looked like Cindy Crawford, if any of you remember who she is. She's a supermodel from the 1980s. And I could do anything, I could be anything, everything was wonderful. And I thought for a minute, well, what is wrong with these people who have such trouble with alcohol? Because this is good stuff, man. And man, I'm gonna have to learn how to do this, drink this, because this is my new best friend right here. And that's genuinely how I felt. My very next memory is waking up in the morning, and it's just, if any of you've ever drank a lot, you know what this feels like. So first of all, you kind of come to, it's light out, it's your eyes are hard to open because it feels like you have rocks of sand in them. Your head is throbbing, you're about to throw up. You don't know what's going on. Something probably crawled into your mouth and died, or at least that's what it feels like. And in my case, remember this was the 1980s, I had this monstrosity, like had its own tax code of a waterbed. And this waterbed was so tall, I had fallen asleep with my legs hanging over the side of it. And so my legs were completely asleep. So I wake up, I can't feel my legs. I don't know what is happening. I've never been drunk before. I've never been hungover. And I look over at this whiskey bottle and it is empty. And so my intention was to have a few drinks and say that I did, and the next thing I remember is waking up to an empty whiskey bottle. Now this would be the first of many of the exact same scenario, maybe different faces, different names, different places, maybe different alcohol, but the reality was for the next 10 years I tried to not have that happen as often as it did, but it happened over and over and over again. So I remember after that moment just kind of thinking, okay, well, I'm gonna have to figure this out because I love this stuff. This stuff is so good. And that's exactly what the deal is. So alcoholism is really quite simple. So people have really complicated it. They've tried to make it this, this wild rubric, if you drink in the morning and if you drink alone and if you drink whiskey and just who knows what. They have these like 47 questionnaires and, if X equals Y over Z, then you might be alcoholic. It's really simple. Alcoholism is a twofold condition, and this is alcoholism as I have experienced it. So this is not my theory, this is my experience. So first and foremost, it is what's the word I'm trying to say? It is categorized by a an inability to control how much I drink when I drink. So there's a Chinese proverb that says the man takes a drink, the drink takes a drink, and the drink takes the man. So I would ingest alcohol, something crazy would happen in my brain. There's people that have studied it and have said that it's chemistry. There's some sort of chemistry that happens, and it becomes a very addictive substance inside of me. I don't have a hard time believing that. I'm a nurse. I watch diabetics who have the same issue with sugar. It's really crazy. I don't have that issue with sugar, but they do. And I had this issue with alcohol and other people don't. It makes complete sense to me that it would be something like this based on my experience. So I take a drink and something goes crazy inside of me, and I am 10 times more thirsty than I was before I started, and it's an insatiable thirst. So I would be more thirsty at the end of the night, and at last call be ordering 3 more pitchers of beer because I was so craving it so bad, even though I was already very drunk. So that's the first part of alcoholism. It says in the basic text that it is the great obsession of every alcoholic that he or she can control and enjoy his or her drinking. And I attempted for the next 10 years to control and enjoy my drinking. I didn't want to get insanely drunk like that, which I did over and over again. I wanted to have a few drinks and call it a night, like a lot of people did. I wanted to get to that nice buzzed feeling and then just have a good time and go home like a normal person, and not end up nearly driving into a river, or end up in jail, or end up waking up someplace I didn't know where I was or what had happened to me. Those kinds of things happened over and over again in the next 10 years. So I was clearly unable to control my drinking when I drank it. And I have tons of ways that I tried changing the people I was around. I tried changing how much money I took with me. I tried driving my car, thinking that if I drove, I certainly would not get that drunk, because I was, remember, a product of the 80s and 90s where drunk driving was very frowned upon, and they would show us heinous pictures of people from the prom getting in car accidents and dying, and but fear was not enough to fight that craving once it got started. So the next problem of the alcoholic is the inability to quit drinking once he or she decides to, and I never really decided to. So for the next 10 years I just tried to control it. Wasn't able to control it, but kept kind of fooling myself, thinking that somehow the next time would be different, or if I just employed a different strategy, it would get better. Of course, whenever you drink this much, you have trouble in life, but overall my life was okay. I managed to go to college and graduate college. I managed to hold jobs down. I managed to do all right. I didn't have the best relationships you can imagine, and I certainly, looking back and after taking the steps, I realized I was pretty much all the awful things you can be: a liar, a thief, a drunk, an infidel, sort of all those things, which I can say now because I've been redeemed from that, and it's okay. So anyhow, I decided in my early 20s that it was time to see if I could quit drinking. So I'd had enough sort of bad experiences. I was now in a position where that kind of drinking, which is somewhat socially acceptable when you're in college, isn't socially acceptable when you're a young professional. And it's not the kind of thing you do at dinner parties. It's not the kind of thing you do at happy hours after work. So I thought, well, crap, I can't, just have a few. Why bother? So I might as well quit. I think I'm going to quit. So I called my dad up. Now, by this time, my dad had been sober for a while. He got sober in 1981, and he was known as Big Book Joe. So they call the AA textbook the Big Book, and he knows it inside and out. But more important, he knows the message that's in it, and he has conveyed it to many people, me included, and saved many a life, being a vessel and a voice of God. So I called my dad and I said, hey Dad, I'm going to quit drinking for a year and I'm just going to see if I can. He had always told me if I was ever unsure that I should try to quit drinking for a year and see if I could. That's actually comes straight out of the AA textbook. It tells us if you're anything like us, meaning alcoholic, you probably won't be able to quit for a year, and even if you manage to scrape together 365 days, you'll probably be miserable, and that's no real way to live, is it? Just being sober but miserable. So I decided I was going to quit. I made it about 3 months. So I lived in Chicago by this time because, of course, I'd had a couple of geographical cures. I had gone from Indianapolis to Flagstaff, Arizona, and then back to the Midwest to Chicago, thinking every time that if I moved, somehow it would be different. But guess what happens? Geographical cures don't work because you follow yourself wherever you go. And so since I was my own problem, I was definitely bringing my problem with me, no matter what part of the country I lived in. So I was in Chicago. I had a pretty good job. I had landed a great job walking to my 13th floor window office for an international organization. I had a apartment about a block away from Lake Michigan. I kind of had everything going for me on the outside. Of course, inside I was a miserable mess. I couldn't seem to have any luck with any relationships. I was always looking for the next thing, whether it was going to be another degree or a different job or this or that. I was never just settled and okay. I was still aimless. I would go to church once in a while because I thought, well, maybe there's something to that, and I would just stand there and cry but not really know why. And God loved the people who were there, but I don't think anybody understood what was wrong with me either. And so I decided I was going to quit drinking, and I made it about 90 days. I went to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. Now, I've mentioned AA a couple of times. I want to make a kind of a disclaimer. So Alcoholics Anonymous, as it was originally founded in the 1930s, was a very different program. So meaning the program's actually the same. It's written down. Thank goodness it's written down. But the people, the method, or not the method, well, maybe the method, but the message that you're going to hear in most AA meetings is 180 degrees opposite of what it was first intended to be. So Alcoholics Anonymous, just for anybody who wants to know, is not a self-help program. So self was actually my problem, and so there's no way that self could also be my solution. So that wasn't it at all. It was a program of action that gave alcoholics something practical to do while they developed a right relationship with God. I mean, that's really what it is. The real issue is not about sobriety and managing to string together some days of sobriety or staying away from a drink one day at a time, which proves nothing, by the way. It is about developing a right relationship with the one who created all things. He does the healing. He does the changing. He does the protection. He does all that stuff. I really have spent no time in the last 22 years trying to stay sober at all. The terms are not too difficult for me. The cost was high. It meant the destruction of self-centeredness. It meant that I had to abandon myself to him for whatever he would have me do in life. So the price is very high, but the terms are actually pretty simple. Not easy, but simple. So anyhow, the message that you're going to hear today is just the opposite. It's basically a you can do it club. It's a pat you on the back, self-help, humanistic. You can do this without God kind of thing, even though they'll give God some lip service. So anyway, so the messages that I heard during those 90 days were just that. I was doing great. I was doing wonderful. It was wonderful. At least I was sober that day. And I'm thinking to myself, does anybody here understand? How can I be in one place where I thought I would meet people who knew me, and man, they don't get it. I'm dying in here, and they're telling me I'm doing good. Is this really all this is quote unquote sobriety? This is crazy. I remember hearing them say once, there was a man, may he rest in peace, who was alcoholic coming around for a while, and ended up being arrested on a warrant. And he managed to be sober for, I don't know, a few weeks or something. But when he was arrested on the warrant, while he was in jail, he hung himself and he killed himself. And I remember us talking about it at a meeting, and one person actually saying these words, at least he died sober. And I think my heart just sunk, and it was just such dread came over me when I realized they don't get it. Oh my word. He committed suicide, but at least he committed suicide without alcohol in his body. That made no sense to me at all. It just made me sick to my stomach. It still makes me sick thinking about it. And that's when I began to sort of be suspicious that this whatever I was doing wasn't going to last. There was no way that I could function for the rest of my life, scraping by a day at a time, white knuckling it. And it didn't matter how many things I changed on the outside, something was still very wrong with me. So I made it about 90 days, and I remember it was August 9th, 1996. I was walking to work. So I walked on Michigan Avenue, which they actually call it the Magnificent Mile. So it was very pretty. It was a beautiful summer morning. And I remember walking along just kind of in my normal state of panic of what the day was going to hold, wondering if today would be the day I would drink again, and not even really mean to. And I could hear the 146 Express bus behind me. Now the 146 Express, so express buses miss stops, and that's so they can go fast and they can get people from one point A to point B fast. So I'm walking, I hear the 146 Express bus, and the thought comes to my mind, I wonder when I would have to step off the curb so that that bus could hit me fast enough and firm enough that I'd end up dead right away and not just crippled or in a wheelchair in the ICU somewhere. And that really terrified me. I had never had a thought before that, and I've never had one since that I would consider suicidal, but that was the one and only, and it frightened me. I stopped, I think, literally in my tracks and kind of looked around like, did anyone hear that? What just happened? And right at that moment, these are the words that came to my mind. I still don't know if it was the Holy Spirit, the devil himself, just my own mind playing tricks on me or what, but these were the words. You are a joke. You are a joke. Now, instead of arguing with that thought, right, we want to defend ourselves and say we're not a joke. We're basically fine people. We are good, upstanding citizens. It's not my fault. Whatever else we want to say, right? No, I agreed with my adversary, which I think is somewhere in Scripture. So I agreed. For the first time in my life, I acknowledged in my own tiny way that moment that I am a joke. Look at me. Here I am. I think I'm so goddamn smart, right? Excuse my language. I went to college. I had this big job. I've been sober for 90 days. I had a AA coin in my pocket, for goodness sake, and yet I could not. I was thinking about stepping in front of the 146 Express bus. And so I admitted it. I am a joke. I am a joke. Right on the heels of that thought came this thought. This has something to do with God. It's God. It has something to do with God. Now, I was not very excited about that. So if you think that, if there's people that you're trying to help, or if you're one of these people who, isn't all excited about becoming a quote unquote Jesus freak, don't worry. I was just like that as well. I was not thrilled about this. It wasn't like I gave my heart to Jesus and everything was wonderful and I immediately experienced such amazing things. That didn't happen that way for me. I was not thrilled about it. I had a ton of religious prejudice. I had a whole bunch of fears of what it would mean to me, what it would mean to have to get to know this God. What if what the things people said were true? What if he really did hate gay people? What if he really did, not that I'm gay, but what if he really did want me to go to China and be a missionary? What if, right? Those were all there. But I knew it had something to do with him, and I thought, oh, crap, but all right. So I stood there for another second, or at least it seems that I did. And this was my sinner's prayer. So for those of you that think that God really works with people only at Billy Graham crusades, or however that works, may he rest in peace, but that this is exactly what my sinner's prayer was. Okay, God, mine even had an expletive in it, which I'll leave out, but it was something like this. Okay, God, you blankety blank win. You win, which was my sinner's prayer. It wasn't some flowery, wonderful, repentant thing. It was an admission, however limited, that I could not function, and that this God, whoever he was, because I didn't really know who he was bigger than me, and he could probably handle this. And so that was it. That was the beginning. I went to work. I made it to work without stepping in front of the bus. I called my dad and I said, I have to come talk to you. You've got to help me. I got down to Indiana after work that night, and about a 2-hour drive, and we talked for hours and hours around a fire in his backyard. My dad then smoked, so he smoked cigarettes while he talked to me. He shared with me his experience with chronic alcoholism, with not being able to control how much he drank, with not being able to quit when he wanted to quit. Didn't matter how much he needed to, how much people begged him to. It didn't matter how much he prayed or went to church or read his Bible. He was not big enough to defeat alcoholism. And so he began to describe those things. I could completely see myself just like him. In fact, I thought he must have been reading my mail or something, because how does he know? But this is exactly the deal for me. I wasn't real excited about it even then. It's such a bittersweet moment. It is not, think of the prodigal son, if you will, who comes back home. Yes, was he overcome when his father came running to him? Sure he was. Do you not think he was so ashamed, doubtful, wondering if it would even work, wondering how in the world this could be this way, maybe even mildly disappointed in his own ignorance and pride that he couldn't make things work out there in the world. And so I was experiencing all of those emotions, and I think it's important to remember people experience that. It's not just a momentous yay, hallelujah for everybody involved right away. It becomes that for sure, but not always right in that moment. So I wasn't real thrilled, but I couldn't deny it. I couldn't deny the handwriting on the wall. I couldn't deny that at all. And so I asked my dad the questions that I ache to hear from other people. And you have to get people get low enough that they're willing to ask this question. But I said, Dad, what do I have to do? And he said, Steph, you have to humble yourself before God. He didn't say I had to pray a prayer, I had to believe anything. He didn't say I had to go to church or read my Bible or join a discipleship group or any of that stuff. He said you have to humble yourself before God. And I knew right then that even though I was a professing Christian, I had been baptized, I had asked Jesus into my heart countless times. I knew that whole drill, that religious drill, but I had never humbled myself before God, right? And so thankfully, that little bit of humility when I acknowledged that I was a joke, that I am a joke, right? That in and of myself, I can do no good thing. When I acknowledged that way back there on Michigan Avenue, it was just that little chink in that big wall of ice that God's light could shine through, and we could make it a little bit bigger. And so I said, okay, well, what do I have to do? Because when you say humble yourself before God, what does that practically mean? What does that mean? How do you know if it's actually happened? Because you pray a prayer. I'd prayed the prayer 100 times before. I'd been baptized in the water. Really, really heartfelt, right? I was an 11-year-old girl. I meant it. What does it mean? What does it mean? How do you do it? He said, well, then you need to call this person and ask them to help you. And I thought, oh my goodness, I don't know her. He said, don't worry, she knows you. I thought, how could she know me? Oh, because guess what? I'm not that unique. All humans are pretty much the same. But anyway, so I had to call somebody that I didn't know and ask her to help me. And when I got back to Chicago, this amazing thing kind of happened. I started to think maybe I'd been making this too difficult. That maybe I really wasn't that bad after all. That I really didn't need to do this drastic thing, whatever it was, and call this stranger and ask her to help me. All right, guys, well, I had to pause. So I've been driving while I've been talking, and I had to pause there, and I listened back and tried to get to a spot where I can kind of sum things up. Real quick though, I love the Girls Just Want to Have Fun, how it just came on. It's kind of a long story of how that happened, but somehow it got set as my ringtone or my notification tone, and it came on at just that moment when I was talking about basically defining myself as the God of my life when I was 6 years old. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But anyhow, so whatever. All right, so if I am thinking correctly, I just told you that I kind of came to that end of myself. I came down, had a long conversation with my dad. My dad explained to me kind of what this is really all about, which is really not about alcoholism, right? Remember, alcoholism is really just the catch. It's kind of the peg that you get sort of caught on, if you will, to bring a person like me to the point where he or she realizes, wow, I cannot take care of myself. My parents couldn't take care of me, and I can't take care of me. And what am I to do then, right? And then you find out the answer, which is you humble yourself before the one who created all things, and he takes care of you. Now, how does that happen practically? And that is, again, like I've said, I think the point that really gets missed a lot. Somehow we turn it into a list of things we have to do, or a list of things we have to believe. And really, it's not even that. I had a list of things to do. I didn't have a list of things to believe, but I had a list of things to do. And those things were really to kind of get me out of the way, so that Abba Father himself could do the work. So I like to liken it to, the great physician, right? So I'm a nurse, like I said, and in surgery, the patient is completely knocked out, right? And the surgeon does all the work. The patient doesn't have to do anything. And that's really sort of how this process works in a lot of ways. But we do participate simply by offering our humility and our willingness to follow directions. Just do the next thing that's put in front of you, so that Abba Father can get the work done inside of you. And slowly but surely, sometimes kind of quickly, you're changed from the inside out. So let me just quick tell you about that, because that is the hope. That is the answer here that makes this all worthwhile. So I mentioned that I was the directions from my dad were to call a woman named Sarah, and Sarah had been she still is a recovered alcoholic, a woman who could mentor me into this recovery as well. And I didn't know her, and I was embarrassed and ashamed. And I got back to Chicago and thought for sure maybe I just kind of I'd made this too much of a big deal, and I really wasn't that bad off, and maybe I could just kind of go about my life and kind of figure this out, because after all, I'm pretty smart with regard to other things. And remember how, in the scriptures we're told that the seed is planted, but some kind of ground that, it can fall on different kinds of ground. And I'll tell you right now, I'll guarantee you that the enemy was ready to steal that seed super fast. So I'm thankful for the prayers and the work and the soil that was there, because it wasn't stolen. And I really think this is maybe one reason. So I got back to Chicago and thought, I don't know, maybe this is just all kind of a dream, and I'm just making a big deal out of nothing. And then Sarah herself called me, and she called me, and all she said was, I hear you need some help. It was that simple. And the dam sort of broke, and all my doubts, I shouldn't say they all went away, but it was like, yes, I need some help. And again, just that little bit of humility to admit, yes, I need help. Not help me, help myself, not anything like that, but just, yes, I need your help. So as you're working with other people, just kind of remember that. Sometimes with alcoholics, we're a little bit harsh, like, they have to be the ones to reach out to us. And it's absolutely 100% true. Unless they're at a certain spot, it really, you can actually do more damage to, emotionally appeal to them, to chase them down. That doesn't work. But once in a while, if you sense that, man, they just need that little bit of a touch or a reach, it can make all the difference. And it did in my case. So when Sarah called and said, I hear you need some help, I just sort of kind of began blubbering and remembered why I need this help, because for me it would be life or death. So I began to meet with Sarah. Sarah took me through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I cannot express enough emphasis on the fact that you have to have a practical program of action. And it cannot be anything that has to do with trying to stay sober. So none of the directions that I was given by my sponsor or the other people in our fellowship of recovered alcoholics had anything to do with staying sober, because that would imply that I had power to stay sober. So they didn't tell me to avoid the bar. They didn't tell me to change my habits. They didn't tell me to give my paycheck to someone else. They didn't even tell me to stay out of bars or not go to happy hour. In fact, the program of action was so drastically different that that I knew that this either was going to completely work or was just some crazy thing. The program of action, the 12 steps, is all about abandoning oneself to our Creator, to the one who created all things. So it was about me acknowledging I am no longer in charge. When I was in charge, I about drove myself to death. So that didn't work. So now I have to abandon my life to something else. Turns out to be the master of the universe, and he will direct my path, right? And he will show me what to do. Now, he does that practically through his people. And that's really important, because it's very easy to say, well, I sort of humbled myself before God on my own. Yeah, no, you didn't. It's impossible. So if you do not I shouldn't say it's impossible. I'm sure all things are possible. But if you haven't humbled yourself before the people around you, before God's people, you've not humbled yourself before him. And so I had to follow directions. And that, some people start freaking out. Well, that sounds like a cult, or this or that. I got to the point where I was like, I don't care. I'm dying. These people were dying the same way I'm dying, and they're okay. And not only are they okay, but they seem to have an answer. They're confident. They keep telling me this will work if I do it. And they're not making the terms too ridiculous. They didn't tell me I had to believe 27 different creeds or, whatever. They told me, look, just do these things, and Abba Father himself will show you. And other people will notice the changes in you probably before you'll even realize what's going on. And you'll be amazed before you're halfway through. That's what the basic text promises. And that's exactly what began to happen. So they gave me kind of crazy directions. I said, well, am I supposed to, go to meetings and do this and do that? And they said, what's your daily life like? So I kind of laid out what my daily life was like. They said, okay, well, we're going to start practicing constant thought of other people. And I thought, what does that have to do with staying sober? And they just sort of smiled and nodded at me. Are you willing to do what we tell you? Yeah, okay, I'm willing to do what I tell you, what you tell me. And so I began to practice in my own very awful way, constant thought of others. And it was little things like smile at people, open the door for people. I rode a city bus to work. Give other people your seat. Defer anytime you can. Put the put the paper towel down in the bathroom for the next person. Little things like that. And the reason is because the problem for the alcoholic, and actually I would say for all humans, is a self-centeredness. We don't even know how self-centered we are because it's at our core, it's at our root, right? We see everything through eyes of how it affects me. And so I was going to have to begin to practice other-centeredness. Now, it's not the actions, and that's one thing I want to make sure I clarify, because people that, are believers get funny about this. I'm not talking about a works-based process here, or saying that doing good actions somehow earns you sobriety. That's absolutely 100% wrong. That's a lie from hell, and it's holding a lot of people back. The reality is I was given practical actions to take that got me out of my own head and got me being able to see things from a different perspective, so that God himself could begin to do the renewal of my mind. As he did that, as I took those actions, as the renewal of my mind began to take place, and sometimes I would have huge strides in short time, and sometimes I would kind of trudge along for a while. As that began to happen, the desire to drink went away, and the obsession to drink, the one where I knew I was going to get drunk and there was really nothing I could do about it, that went away. I put no effort into trying to stay sober. In fact, they said, well, is it expected in your job that you would go to, out to dinners with the doctors? I worked at a physician group, and I said, yes. I said, there's alcohol there, and they said, yeah, there's alcohol everywhere. And they said, well, then go and be a blessing. Okay. I said, what do I do? you go and you do your job. You have conversations with people. You ask them about them. You focus on how you can be helpful. So there was lots of different gimmicks, if you will, to get me out of my own head. I didn't even think about the drink after a while. It never occurred to me. I went to a bachelorette party, for goodness sake, because it felt like that was the right thing to do, to be helpful and kind to a family member. But anyhow, the point I'm getting at is, I just want to say it over and over again. Any program of action that encourages the alcoholic to try to stay sober in any way, to fight off the drink, is doomed to fail, because he or she cannot do that. And all you're doing at that point is building up their ego that already exists, that think that they can do it if they just try hard enough. And that's a lie. And the program, really, the whole thing in life, right? The relationship with God is not me plus God. It's God, right? It's Him. It's Him alone. And all I am required to do is submit. I submit to Him, and then He does the work. And so He does for me what I could never have done for myself. And it still remains the same today. And so I began to take these steps. So I began to take actions. And then steps 4 and 5 are about a searching and fearless moral inventory. This is a phenomenal a set of steps here, where with a trusted person, with one who understands human nature and understands Abba Father, you sit down and you go over your past, and you go over the ways that you have harmed people and ways that people have harmed you. You go over kind of your perspectives on life, and I'll tell you what, the light bulbs just start blowing up inside your head when Abba Father begins to reveal to you. It's probably there all along. It's just you can see it now because you're out of the way. But you begin to see, this is why I was having such a hard time in life, right? Because I saw things through this very skewed soul sickness, sin sickness filter. And now I see what Abba Father has to say. Now, was there Bible study and things like that involved? Of course, sure, absolutely. But those were not requirements, right? Those were things that began to rise up in me, or grow inside of me as a hunger of my own. Because the scripture is true, where it says, if you draw near to Him, He draws near to you. And so I began to grow hungry for this. I began to want more of Him. I began to want to understand, and more and more every day. And it happened. It was an organic process. It wasn't because anybody gave me a list of Bible studies I had to do. And I remember the first time that I was in a romantic relationship, and I attempted to have a sleepover that night. And I had sleepovers, for 10 years of my life. No big deal, right? But I could not have this sleepover, and it wasn't because anybody told me it was wrong. Nobody told me it was wrong, because they knew that if I was truly pursuing God, and God was answering and opening my eyes, that these things would become real to me, and they didn't have to tell me, right? And so that's exactly what happened. And those were the kinds of things that began to occur, where I knew that He was changing me, because this was not happening externally. This was inside of me, and it blew me away. I don't know that for me there was just one moment where I knew I'll never have to drink again, but it was kind of more of a longer process of becoming free, and then realizing after a while, wow, I haven't thought about alcohol once for a really long time. And that in of itself was a miracle, because I was the kind of person who, whether I was sober or drinking, I was always thinking about drinking or not drinking. And to be the kind of person who didn't even give it a thought was just amazing. I remember the first time that someone I had a kind of a large resentment against, and resentment kills the alcoholic, by the way, and pretty much other people as well. But I had a big resentment against this person, and the directions to me from my sponsor were to pray for this person, which I thought was just ridiculous, right? Because I pray for this person to get hit by a bus maybe, but I prayed just exactly as I was told. And sure enough, there came a moment where I began to feel compassion for somebody that I had theretofore had felt hatred. And I knew that was an inside out job, that God was doing that inside of me. So today, kind of fast forward, of course life is filled with ups and downs and ins and outs, and things where you're screwing up. But the screwing up is I'm allowing myself, temper tantrums, or self-centered temper tantrums, or I'm feeling sorry for myself because I'm not getting what I want, or I have expectations of other people and they're not filling them, and all those are their own sorts of sin, right? But so those are what my ups and downs are today, like everybody else. With regard to alcohol, just not an issue. It's just not an issue. And I still call myself an alcoholic because I'm pretty sure that if alcohol got into my system, the same physical ailment would exist. But the mental obsession to drink is gone. So for me, it's a non-issue. That doesn't mean I take it lightly. I mean, I must maintain conscious contact with God. I must be on my knees daily, literally and figuratively, in order to maintain rightness and to not be cut off from the sunlight of the Spirit, or else I suppose there's danger I could drink again anytime I begin to rely on myself to do it, to take care of myself. That's when it will happen. But thank goodness for His grace, it has not yet, because once you get a taste and once you understand this healing that is available, it's really hard to go back. So when people say relapse, I think, I don't know that they ever really got it, because once you get it, it's really hard to quote unquote relapse. You relapse if you're depending on yourself to keep yourself sober. All right, so after all that, I feel like it's kind of coming to an anticlimactic close. So I just want to let people know that there is still hope for the alcoholic. I work in an emergency room, and I always ask for the drunks because everybody else hates them. And let me just tell you, we're pretty deplorable, right? We pee everywhere. Alcoholics pee everywhere. We're mean sometimes, or we cry. Of course, we're just sloppy drunk and miserable. A lot of times we bleed. I'm thinking of the ER right now. Just we smell bad. We're horrible people. Like, I get it. And so I'm always like, just give me the drunks. Like, I have a soft spot in my heart, obviously, for them. And then I look for opportunities to talk to them. I met someone recently who is exactly my age, within a couple months, and is probably going to die shortly from cirrhosis of the liver. And I said to this person, I said, look, you're still breathing, and I'm just going to tell you flat out, there is hope for you, but the price is really, really high. And if you're willing, remember this one word, recovered, with an ED on the end of it. And if you get to the point that you're like, I got one last shot, you find somebody who can say they are recovered. And I am 100% sure Abba Father would put this person in touch with one of us or someone else. I know He would, because He is the Father to all of us, and He wishes for everyone to be healed and well. I'm sure of it. And the fact that that was available to me is amazing. I'm thankful. Circumstantially, I was young, and so I didn't ruin a lot of people's lives. I certainly committed a lot of harms. And Abba Father is gracious to forgive and also show me how to make those things right where I'm able. I'm married now to a man who was also an alcoholic, and he's sober about the same amount of time as I am. He has a little more hair curling experiences than I do. He drank longer than I did, but we share together like two people who survived the Titanic, if you will. Two people came together who said, wow, and this God has done this for us, and we don't even know how to say thank you except to pass it on to the next person. And that's actually a compulsion. How could we not? So if you're starving right now, I know where there's bread, and it's available to you. It's a banquet, actually. It's available to you, and it's only the enemy of your soul who wants to keep you from it, and he'll do it by using your own ego against you. He'll use your own pride. He'll use your own whatever. He'll tell you that you can do it if you just try hard enough. and that's a lie. It's the best thing you can do is admit complete defeat and stay down, is what we told people. Quit trying to get up again. Just stay down and let the one who created all things come and lift you up.